Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next edition of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I'm your host. Today I am delighted to finally welcome, after months and months and months of chasing this guy down, I've finally got Jon Corbett, who is Director and Regional Head of SMEs at Barclays Bank. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That makes me sound awful, doesn't it?
No, it makes it sound like you're a very, very busy man, as are most of the board of the STC. Yeah. So you're not the only one who I am very tenacious at making sure I get hold of. There's a chap from GT who's next, who I keep seeing and he nods at me, but we'll eventually get him on as well. Yeah. Jon, thanks for coming on. The premise of the show is that we're going to, as everybody knows, we're going to talk through basically a very short background piece on yourself, sort of career in banking and other sort of roles that you have in the region, and then for us to really talk through the business and businesses and what you guys are doing in the region. Career-wise, I've grabbed all of this off LinkedIn and it took me all of about 2 seconds to read it because you've basically been working at Barclays all of your career.
I have.
30 years.
I have.
3 decades.
32 years this year.
32 years. And so presumably you left school and went straight into your local branch.
Yeah.
And started as what?
Of sorts. I left school at 18. Decided at that stage university wasn't for me. Sure. At the time the banks were offering or promoting, don't go to university, come and join us on management training programs. I'd realised probably at that stage that what I thought I was going to be, as in a professional footballer, wasn't going to happen.
Okay, so that's what you were thinking.
So that was that was where my mind had been, but I decided, wasn't going to join. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Banking looked interesting. The local bank manager in the village I grew up in, or Woburn Sands, which is where I come from, was often on the golf course. Thought that looked career for life, interesting job.
Play a lot of golf.
That was sort of like, and didn't expect. If I look then, did I expect to still be in banking 32 years later? Don't know. But it's been a good career for me. It's a good organisation to work for. But it was sort of like, it was sort of almost fall into at the stage. It wasn't. I was at school studying, thinking I want to be a banker.
Well, to 2 points. So the first thing is, I think most people in financial services, certainly very common in financial planning, which is my area clearly. A lot of the stories are that you fall into it. You don't go through school thinking I want to join a bank or I want to become a financial planner or financial advisor. It's you don't get that type of financial education at school or the career support through school like that. And you're right, you then just sort of fall into it. But the 30-year piece, we work with a number of business and banking executives, and a lot of them have been in the bank for sort of 20, 30, even 40 years, whether it be Barclays or other institutions. So they must be doing something right from a career development and support, and clearly the package and compensation. But the whole thing must be worth it.
I think when I look back in terms of my career within Barclays, it's been a good organisation to work for. It's changed and evolved as banks have generally over the years and the experience. But it's given me a career which is I found interesting. My kids go banker, that's boring. Actually, the opportunity to go and see businesses and understand, companies, what they do, I find fascinating. And, that side of it is really enjoyable. I think over the course of that, the early days was on the training program I was on. It was all about getting your banking exams, which, there was focus towards delivering that. That's slightly different now in terms of that focus perhaps or requirement. But it was get those banking exams and then start to develop your career into what was always, the aspiration was to be a corporate banker or otherwise once you're in the organisation. But there is a lot of opportunity within the organisation. It's a big company.
Yeah, sure.
And they have been a good company to work for, looking after.
And so your role now is sort of director and regional head of SMEs. So what does that mean?
Yeah. My niece, who lives just up the road actually in Toaster, she said to me just a few weeks ago, so what do you actually do? and it was really hard to explain, but I guess in a nutshell, so there's two sort of elements to the job that I do. The main bit, or the bit that's relevant for this, is so regional head of SME, and that's basically my team across the counties of Bedfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire are working with SMEs where we set a turnover band of 400,000 and above. We're the only bank that does give relationship managers that early in terms of life of a business, which is important because we do see that is important in terms of that advice and relationship that we foster. So it's the team of relationships managers across and relationship directors across that geography, working with businesses across a range of sectors. Only ones we don't necessarily look after within my team is real estate and agriculture. But that's where my team operate. We got about 7,000 clients within that space. And very diverse geography. If you think of that patch, Gerrard's Cross in the south, High Wycombe, up to Corby and Kettering in the north, very different markets.
Yes.
Go across into to the east side. My team actually go into Newmarket, which obviously has a big horse racing focus. Back across to Brackley and Tame in the west side. So quite a big geography, quite diverse both in terms of client base and industries. And then I have another part of my day job, which is a national responsibility for some pension administrating work, which is based out of Milton Keynes. So that's very different, but that's essentially my job in a nutshell. 90 odd people in the team.
Okay, and so Barclays are heavily involved in the Silverstone Technology Cluster, in part because you helped launch and sort of co-found it, as it were. Why?
Good question. And so if I go back, and this probably goes back a little bit around a personal journey and personal history, if I'm honest. And I'm born and bred in Milton Keynes. I've lived in and around Milton Keynes all my life. Grew up, as I've alluded to, Woburn Sands, Aspie Guys. And I was asked to come back to head up the team in Milton Keynes, working actually at that time with large corporates and mid-sized organisations in 2009. And as I came back and we started to look at how do we grow the business in which was post-2008 crisis, financial crisis, and etc. Where do we look at the business? How do we look at growing? And at that time we didn't have an office in Northampton. I opened an office in Northampton in 2010, and within that we were looking at so where are the opportunities? What is going on in the local economy? And it kept coming back, which is something I knew anyway, being local. The engineering side that is in the area, and the amount of technology capabilities that we have, and collaboration opportunities, etc. And that sort of coincided with. My dad was a professor at Cranfield University on the engineering side. Okay. And I always knew how powerful Cranfield was, and I didn't think we necessarily appreciated what was on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And you looked at all of these ingredients, and everyone talks about Cambridge and how the high growth of Cambridge. And I looked at Cambridge at a time when the bank was looking at, how do we support entrepreneurship? How do we support high growth businesses? And I looked at it and thought, actually, do you know what? We've got all the ingredients that Cambridge had in the late 80s, 90s, but we just can't, it's anecdotal. We can't put a finger in it. And that coincided actually with Ros Bird coming into Silverstone Park. And I was introduced to Ros by actually some members of my team who had met Ros, and we sat down and we both had exactly the same thoughts, and we both talked about the anecdotal evidence that we knew something was exciting about the area, but we couldn't put our finger on it or couldn't evidence it to anybody. And Ros had the great idea of, well, let's commission a report, let's have a white paper that we can present and demonstrate it, and I was very supportive of that. We worked together. Ros was the driving force, as you'll know, behind it in terms of coercing a few people into being involved and putting their fingers in their pockets, hands in their pockets, and I likewise got a couple of people involved as well, and we commissioned that report. When we commissioned the report, the thing that we wanted to say was, not just about what exists, but what needs to happen to enable that to develop. And again, as we looked at that and we understood within that report, the evolution of high performance technology motorsport report gave some real areas that then said, this is what we need to do to take the business forward. And that's where the STC and Silverstone Technology Cluster came from. And for me, it was about then looking at what the area stands for, and some of that is about Milton Keynes and looking at what is the future of Milton Keynes, having been local and looking at it's been successful for 50 years, but what does it stand for next?
Yes. And
that was perhaps again a personal journey, and it sounds a bit parochial, but then it's about what it means for the region. And actually within that, the bit that I looked at and was very aware of is, how do we help and support our economy thrive and grow? And actually within that, what we can put back into the to the local economy and supporting business, if we help support prosperity will come back to us.
Sure, of course.
And that was sort of some of that thought process. So it was a personal interest, it was a personal journey, but it was something that when I looked from a Barclays perspective, actually, that lens of thinking about, right, how do we support SMEs? How do we play our part in building that ecosystem, building that trust, which is what Cambridge evolved from? And again, you have to be careful I don't keep referring back to Cambridge, but use that as a blueprint. As a blueprint. For now, some of the challenges we're a bit more desperate in terms of our makeup. We don't have a conurbation to base a sales round, which is partly why we called it Silverstone, because it gave us that profile, it gave us the brand, but it also gave us an anchor point.
Yes.
What we have to say is, it's not just about Silverstone, it's not just about motorsport, it's also about how we're supporting businesses and SMEs.
It's also not just about technology either.
Absolutely, and it's about how we're supporting the SMEs in that space. So I've been involved in the STC from the start. It's still something that I feel passionate about. I think it's got a really important part to play in promoting the area, and in particularly with the Oxford-Cambridge arc.
Super cluster as well.
Super cluster as well. And I think that's great. I think it gives us something that we can be proud of in the area. And we've actually got a fact base that goes, actually, this is why it's important.
So picking up on a couple of things you've said there. So you've used the word ecosystem, or the phrase ecosystem. What's an ecosystem, and how are Barclays helping to grow those? So
for me, the ecosystem is around a number of things. One is about the way we facilitate support for businesses, the collaboration, both in terms of business to business, but support mechanisms where we're able to help businesses achieve their goals and their aspirations, or actually help them identify that there is a goal or an aspiration that they should be aiming for, and then having the support mechanisms around it. And for me, if I look at, from a Barclays point of view, sometimes it's about the interaction we have with clients or non-clients to go, actually, we understand where you are wanting to take your business, where you're wanting to go. We might not have the answer, or what you need isn't what is not something that the banks would provide, but we know a man who can, or we can point you in the direction, or we can give you advice, or we can give you that network to enable you to understand where the opportunities for support might be. Or it might be that actually, we're helping to facilitate something where we see that there's a gap in the market. So, for example, one of the things that came out of the report was the lack of growth funding in the area, and some of the comment actually within the report was banks don't understand us, and there probably was an element of that. I don't necessarily disagree with that. There's also an element of, do people understand what the mechanisms of growth funding, and actually are they available? So actually, from our point of view, is starting to think about how can we bring that into the region, showcase the region to investors or business angels or whatever that might look like, to help facilitate that and build that ecosystem around. There's funding options, there's availability to support business. So that's sort of like one area where you go, that's something we help facilitate. But it's wider than that. It's about that say network. I use the term network in loose terms, but it is about building that trust and collaboration.
And so that would be, because I've personally got some experience of this with Longhurst, my business, and we bank with Barclays, but just to help those listening understand, so you're talking in relation to collaborating or helping people sort of connect the dots, not just to other trusted professional advisors, whether it be sort of tax, legal, financial planning, or whatever it is, but also potentially to other customers or clients of yours who might be able to help them sort of with a project or...
Absolutely. So a couple of examples where I'd go. One might be where we've got a business that's looking to grow, not sure where to go in the next cycle. Can we connect them to people that have been there and done that in the past and provide mentoring support or otherwise? Or and a great example, and Steve Henson is really good at this, and Steve's one of the relationship directors in my team. Recently he had one of his clients talking about the need for a certain project. They didn't have capacity in their machining. And Steve's able to give them a name of someone else that he works with, who he connects them to go, actually, do you know what? You've got spare capacity. They haven't got the capacity to do the machining. Can you work together? And actually, that builds a relationship that hopefully can foster. So, that's sort of like an example where it's about just on the business or in the business, but it's also about how we can support
added
people
value,
on the business.
Huge added value there.
Absolutely. And you'll see things like our Eagle Lab that's popped up in Cranfield that we've launched, and that sort of again is building that community. It's about helping people connect. It's helping people understand some of the skills that they might need, some of the knowledge that they might need to help their businesses to.
So for those listening that haven't heard of an Eagle Lab before, what's an Eagle Lab?
So Eagle Lab is there's different models that we have across the country. The one that we have in Cranfield is a combination of two. It's one, we have what we call makerspace, so there will be capabilities for things like 3D printing and certain technology to support prototyping or otherwise. And we have that capability in Cranfield. But the wider concept is more, I guess I'd describe it as an incubator, where we're creating a community where businesses can either have office space, they can have hot desk space, they can drop in. We run events on a regular basis to provide that support and education, whether it be around business, whether it be things that you need to understand within your business, or certain topics of interest. So, for example, Ros was at our Eagle Lab in Cranfield on Tuesday night, giving a talk around the ecosystem and how important that and the role that the businesses can play. So it's facilitating those sort of things, but fundamentally it's about taking businesses that have an aspiration for growth and scale up and giving them that incubator space to support them in terms of that journey.
Yeah, I went to the launch of the Cranfield Eagle Lab, and it's really impressive. So for those listening, there's areas there we can hot desk, you can rent office space there, you can actually take up a permanent base there as well on a sort of monthly lease, which is really, really useful. And actually a few of us, including Matt Lawley, who's part of your team, and Kirsty Simmons, who's part of EMW Law, we're talking about maybe spending one day a month there collaboratively together working on stuff, but also being there to sort of talk to some of the residents and people benefiting them.
Absolutely. We have a lady in there, Liz Bodie, who's the ecosystem manager. Ecosystem word again coming out, but some of her role is not only to go and promote what we're doing to the businesses, but it's also then that collaboration to go, actually, as your business grows, what we want is the businesses to effectively graduate, for want of a better description, out of our Eagle Lab and go on to other space. So some of her work is getting to understand where is that grow on space, some of that Silverstone
Innovation Centre where we are right
absolutely.
Now. Absolutely.
And building that knowledge to go, actually, your journey doesn't end with the Eagle Lab, it's how do we support
you
going on. Absolutely.
Funding. So you've mentioned that all well and good writing a report and issuing a report and identifying that actually support's needed, but actually funding and support with funding avenues is required. And so I've seen, obviously, from your current CV that you not only are you obviously clearly part of Barclays and a founding board member of the SDC, but you also sit as a board member on SEMLEP and also strategic oversight board member for the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. So I think we should just cover off those two quickly. So
sure.
For those that never heard of SEMLEP,
yep.
What is SEMLEP and what's your role with it?
Okay, so SEMLEP is the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership.
Well remembered.
Okay. So SEMLEP. Actually, I call my team the South East Midlands and Cambridgeshire team after SEMLEP to give it that identity.
Sure.
I then have to explain again that we actually go down to High Wycombe and Gerrards Cross. But so SEMLEP is, if you go back to the post-banking crisis and the challenges around government supporting businesses and otherwise. The local enterprise partnerships was something that was launched back in the day that provides that mechanism for local decision making in terms of growth funding that's delivered out into regions. It's a combination of public sector and business sector. So I sit on the board as a private sector board member, providing the voice of the business community, if you like. And some of that is around understanding what the strategic economic plan should be for the area, how we address some of the things that the business needs, whether that be things like skills, investment and otherwise. So it's that body that effectively is how government is delivering local decision making into to local regions, and SEMLEP is the body for this.
Okay.
For this region.
And so let's say I own a business locally. How can SEMLEP help me? How do I engage with SEMLEP? Do I? What's the?
So there's various different elements. Some of what SEMLEP does is if you look at the strategic economic plan, it focuses on certain showcase sectors, and there's some input from business around what that should look like, what the future of that, be it transport and logistics, being a prime one in this area. High performance technology, engineering is another one. So a number of different things, but businesses can engage through that to influence in that way. There's also what the SEMLEP and LEPs have are growth hubs. So in this region, people will have heard perhaps of Velocity that's more prevalent, I guess, down towards North Buckinghamshire, Bedfordshire, although it does cover Northamptonshire. There's also in the Northamptonshire Growth Hub, which was the old growth hub of the Northamptonshire Enterprise Partnership. So those are there to help businesses, not just start up, but also facilitate advice and guidance around growth and the various different areas of growth. And they provide some great support to businesses. So, there's different channels of engagement, depending on what involvement you want or support.
And people can obviously go on the SEMLEP website, and there's, I've been on there, and it's just full of information.
Absolutely.
And, fine.
Absolutely. And so within that, as I say, I'm a private sector board member. I also have some committee memberships, so risk and audit, and I also sit on the local growth fund task group, which is actually, I sit there as the business representative with the chief execs from all the councils, local authorities across the region, starting to look and recommend the decisions of where that growth funding should go in terms of specific projects.
Okay, and that then comes back to my original question, which is, basically, how is that helping businesses from a funding perspective? So
that can be around, project funding. That can be around, infrastructure projects as well.
Okay. Midlands Engine Investment Fund.
Yeah.
What's that?
So Midland Engine Investment Fund was something that was a collaboration of the LEPs across the Midlands Engine region. And the Midland Engine is a collaboration. People heard of the Northern Powerhouse, and a Midland Engine is the Midland version of the Northern Powerhouse.
Okay.
And when there was some research undertaken around those funding mechanisms in regions, it was quite evident that if you're in the southeast, there's lots of different availability of capital. There's quite a more active investment community, and so for facilitating that demand that's out there. But what it also identified that in both the Northern Powerhouse region and the Midland Engine region, there was a lack of that funding or different mechanisms for funding outside of traditional bank funding. So the Midland Engine Investment Fund was launched a couple of years ago. It provides different mechanisms of funding. There's 60% of the fund is debt orientated, of which some of it is towards small loans up to 125,000, and some of it is larger scale loans up to 1.5 million. Typically where the risk profile wouldn't necessarily obtain conventional bank funding or conventional funding, and it's with an idea of funding growth and funding employment. And then the other element of the fund is around things like equity, to provide capital into businesses, again for growth, but also there's a small element of the fund that is proof of concept, which is the really risky end that is quite challenging, but there's a part of the fund there. So it's a 250 million or 260 million pound fund that is through European Investment Bank. The LEPs put money into it as well, and then it is about how there's various different those funding mechanisms that are out there to promote or to provide that access to finance. My involvement in it, one, it's that holistic view that we need to provide to our clients and the businesses that we work with around, do they understand all the different options available to them? And actually that's the bit where, going back to the ecosystem bit, that's a bit about us providing that wider support. We have a challenge, I think, in this region. We're actually doing really well. There's a good demand in terms of access to the fund. But does a company in Luton or a company in Milton Keynes, do they realise they're part of the Midland Engine Investment Fund?
Yeah.
We're not part of the Midland Engine, but we're part of the Midland Engine Investment Fund. So, there's some of, we need to do better at getting that message out. I think we've done a good job. I think, there's still for businesses out there, do they understand that is available to them?
And how do they engage? So how would they? So I run a business. If how would I understand or find out what I could apply for and etc.
Yeah. So first of all, how do you know about it? Well, that might be through the interaction with SEMLEP, through the growth funds. If your banker is aware of it, then they should be talking to you about it, or your professional advisors, should be signposting. But
presumably a Barclays banker would be mentioning it.
Of course they would. Of course they would be. But also then it's about that introduction that can then there's fund managers within each of the pots of funding, the two different loan pots, the equity pot and the proof of concept pot. So it's speaking to those fund managers to understand the eligibility, to understand the process behind the application, and to understand the appetite.
The foresight part.
They are, yes.
Yeah. So they're part of that.
Yeah, they are.
Fine.
Yeah, they manage one of the funds.
Fine. So the Tom Hayward from Foresight is the episode interview before this one went live, or two before this. Okay, so
perfect,
fine. So people listening to this can go back 1 or 2 episodes to listen to Tom, and he explains all about equity.
Sure. And my role, just back to your point around my role within it, so I sit on the Strategic Oversight Board. I actually chair the Strategic Oversight Board now, which looks at how we deploy that and is it working? And if it's not working, what changes do we need to make, or what do we need to think about? Working with the British Business Bank to make sure that that it's delivering what it needs to deliver.
John, you're clearly a busy man. My God, where do you find time to do all of this stuff? So
that's what my wife said.
Yeah, I
actually,
bet she does.
She does ask, but and we haven't even talked about what I do outside of work, which is all very very much football orientated. But there we go.
So one question I had from something I sort of saw online, but I think we've kind of covered it, is a sort of a phrase that Barclays penned, which is called sort of beyond banking. And so my original question was going to be, what does that mean? But I think we've kind of covered it in that, you're more than just a bank. It's more than just doing day to day.
I think we've covered a lot of it in terms of some of what we've talked about. I think the bit for me, and this is where it also comes back to that wider support for the economy, for the region, etc. We look in Barclays. Our purpose is very much around helping the UK go forward, helping the UK economy thrive. And that to do that, there's certain things we do. We lend money. We look after deposits. Guess what? So do other banks. We've got some things that we think we do differently. We've got some new solutions that we brought out, a tie-up with a company, Market Invoice, where we provide a different type of funding option. We've got a venture debt proposition which we provide. So there's things that we think are different, but fundamentally, what I think stands us out is that relationship piece. And it's about our people, because, as I say, by and large, the banks tend to have the same sort of solutions, with a few tweaks around it. But it's how can we support our clients? How can we support businesses that we work with? Actually, whether you're a client or not, how can we help you grow? How can we help you achieve your ambitions? How can we help you rise in terms of what you want to achieve and deliver? And that's where we go beyond banking. That's where we think about the digital channels we use, and we need to be digitally enabled to help our clients. But it comes back to the relationship that we provide that helps facilitate some of those different areas.
Summed up with added value.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Talk to me about football then. So outside, let's to put Barclays to one side and SEMLEP and Midlands Engine Investment Fund. What does sort of private time look like for John?
So private time is very much revolves around football. I said earlier about as a kid growing up, it was always I was going to be a professional footballer. I'd heard people say that I was going to be, so I just believed that I would be. So I played semi-professionally for a number of years. Best part of 20 years, and when I retired, I took my coaching badges, UEFA B qualified coach.
Nice.
But now it's more about watching. So I'm an avid Derby County season ticket holder. Lampard, enjoying the Lampard era, and while we have him. So football is a big part. Not just I'm a Derby County supporter. My wife and I, we have 3 children, and my eldest boy, Sam, and my daughter, Molly, both season ticket holders with me at Derby.
Wonderful.
My wife and our middle son, Jake, are both season ticket holders at West Ham.
Are they really?
So we're a family, mixed family, so we go our separate ways
on a weekend,
on a weekend and come back together in the evening, either commiserate or otherwise. The problem was when a few years ago they played each other. And,
how did that go down? What was the result?
So the away game, the West Ham game, we drove down in the car together. We went in the away end, they went in the home end. Derby went 1-0 up, and we lost 3-1. The worst thing my wife could have asked me when we got back in the car was, "So what went wrong?" and I'm a sore loser. We didn't, or I didn't talk much for a little while after that. The home game was actually on New Year's Eve.
Okay.
We went up and stayed up in Derbyshire as a family, and Derby won the game 2-1, which I think
Brilliant.
my wife was secretly quite relieved about, because
Yeah.
it meant New Year's was a happy occasion.
This is when West Ham were down in Championship.
Yeah. So a lot of family life is evolved around juggling the diaries to who's playing where and what games are going on. So,
John, we are 35 minutes in.
right.
Hasn't that gone quickly?
Yeah, it has flown by. Yeah.
So we've covered off Barclays, rightly so, SEMLEP, Midlands Engine, Ecosystems, Eagle Labs, Beyond Banking, Derby County, West Ham.
Got that in.
Got that in. It's also your 30th wedding anniversary this year.
It is,
I made a note to say that, so I thought I'd put you on the spot there. It's also your good lady's 50th. So if she is listening to this, I have encouraged John to take you somewhere very hot and expensive.
I don't think she'll be able to hear this one back.
Fine, we'll try and get your kids to listen to it, or at least one of your colleagues. Anyway, right, let's sort of bring this slowly to a close, because I know that you're a busy man and got to get on with sitting on one of these boards and doing something this afternoon. So, and it is a Friday. So, 2 or 3 questions. So before I get on to the final 2, which I always ask, is there anything that I haven't asked you, or anything I haven't covered off that, whilst I've got you on, I've finally got you on, that you'd like to sort of talk about?
The only thing I would say, and it sort of brings together some of what we've talked about, is the opportunity for this geography. There's a lot of talk around the Oxford-Cambridge arc, and it's one of the trailblazers. There's 3 trailblazers across the UK that the government have identified for economic growth, which, bearing in mind what's going on out in the economy at the moment, and we haven't talked about the dreaded B word, obviously, but that's a big opportunity for us. My challenge around that is there's a danger, if we're not careful, that it becomes about infrastructure, it becomes about road and transport, and it becomes about housing, which is all important. What we really need to think about is, how does business engage with that? How does business understand what that opportunity is? Whether it be through SEMLEP, whether it's through the STC and, you say super cluster, those sort of things, the opportunity for business. And that's the bit that we can't let this go past without seizing that, because it is, I look at it as a once in a lifetime opportunity. So for businesses out there that think that this is just about Milton Keynes and the opportunity for Milton Keynes, it's not. It's about our region, and it's about the responsibility that we have in playing a part in that, because it is something that's quite exciting. We've got a lot of people looking at this region with interest, and we need to take advantage of that.
Totally agree with everything you've just said. It's an incredibly exciting business region to be part of. That's why we launched Longhurst last year, to be here, right in slap bang in the middle of it. So to hear you say that is reassuring. So great. Last question, which has changed from the first season. So the first season, I always used to ask people to give me a bit of life advice. But we now know that we've got some students listening, which is great, as well as clearly business owners, and certainly young business owners. And so the question I have for you is that you've been working in banking for 30 years, clearly an absolute master in your field. You sit on a number of boards, STC, SEMLEP, Midlands Engine. but you weren't always a master, and weren't always as wise as you are, or I would say you are. If you could take yourself back to not necessarily a teenager, but even just a young professional, where sort of a little bit green, a little bit wet behind the ears, what bit of advice would you give yourself?
So it's quite a general one in terms of life and career, and I probably take this from my dad actually. You know, my dad was a professor at Cranfield University. He left school at 15 without any qualifications, and worked in just an office job. And he always said, if you put your mind to it and you are prepared to work hard enough, then you'll achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Yep.
And actually, it took me a while to realise that as I went through the early days of my career and some of the things that I've done elsewhere. But some of that, you know, when you suddenly mature and you realise what you really want to achieve in life, you know, there's nothing truer than that. That if you are prepared to put in the effort, you know, you'll reap the reward.
And when you grow up, John, what do you want to be?
Professional footballer.
And on that note, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hope to have you back on in due time. I know that with Matt Lawley and others at Barclays, we'll be bringing them on for mastermind sessions and other such podcast recordings, but hopefully we can get you on also in due time. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.